U.S. President Biden and German Chancellor Scholz delivered their decisions on battle tanks for Ukraine. First Germany, then the United States. A carefully choreographed show of unity after days that have been anything but. We decided to call on Benjamin Schmitt to discuss what just happened here. He's senior fellow at the University of Pennsylvania Kleinman Center for Energy Policy. He's a former advisor at the U.S. State Department. Benjamin, it's good to see you again. You and I, we spoke many times when U.S. President Biden wanted former German Chancellor Angela Merkel to stop the Nord Stream 2 natural gas pipeline project. Merkel, she wouldn't budge. Biden eventually ended his opposition because he wanted to protect German-U.S. ties. Today, Biden again did a 180, this time on sending tanks to Ukraine. Scholz was standing firm. If there aren't any U.S. tanks, there will be no German tanks. Did we just see policy being repeated?
Well, hello, Brent. Hello, friends. It's great to see you. Happy New Year. I think that is an absolute certainty that we have seen a repeat of policy dynamics that we've seen basically since the start of the Biden administration. Let's step back to mid-2021 when U.S. bipartisan congressional sanctions that were congressionally mandated, mandatory sanctions, were waived by the Biden administration. And there was an agreement from the Merkel chancellery that if Russia weaponized energy, then the Merkel government would seek sanctions at the EU level to stop projects like Nord Stream 2 and to hold Russia to account. Well, Russia was intentionally limiting gas supplies and exacerbating an energy crisis in 2021, leading up to its early 2022 invasion of Ukraine. And in spite of that overt weaponization of energy, Germany didn't do anything. And the Biden administration nevertheless stood by and waived sanctions that would have helped, hopefully, to some degree, the national security situation in Europe with respect to European energy security and Russian malign influence going forward. Skip forward after the war had begun. The chancellery had come out along with ministries in the German government and pointed out that Russia's claims that they had technical issues with Siemens turbines that they needed from Canada, that would have to have Canada lift sanctions to bring these turbines over to help the Nord Stream 1 pipeline operate, were false. These were a false pretense in order to try to get export controls regimes, sanctions regimes lifted in the West. In spite of this, Berlin still put pressure on Canada, and the Biden administration, after Canada lifted this waiver against its own sanctions policy, said that this would help Europe's energy security. It didn't. Again, more of a priority to create this unity, this separate track of unity with Berlin specifically, not Europe as a whole. Because remember, most, if not almost every country in Europe was opposed to Nord Stream 2, especially along NATO's eastern flank. Most of the transatlantic community pointed out that these were false claims on the turbine front. And we're again seeing this with the tank.
Yeah, and there was the claim, or now we hear it even more, that former Chancellor Angela Merkel may have been just too positive on Russia. We're hearing that now with Chancellor Scholz. There's lots of criticism that Scholz was dragging his feet. We've seen it on social media today. I mean, just one image we want to show our viewers today, if we can pull that up, is an iPhone that it's supposed to look like it belongs to Vladimir Putin. And on that, we see text messages coming from German Chancellor Scholz reading basically, "I'm sorry, I tried." I mean, the idea here, of course, that's an exaggeration, but the idea is that the Social Democrats, especially this chancellor, cannot see Russia for what Russia is or for what its allies see Russia as. Do you see this difference in perception? Do you see that, based on what we've seen in the last couple of days, persisting?
Well, Brent, obviously that meme is an exaggeration, but it really speaks to a broader concern that I think a lot of security experts in the West have seen. First of all, this notion that if the war stopped tomorrow for some reason, if there was a preemptive ceasefire that Russia wanted to stop fighting in order to restock itself so it could take another run at Ukraine in the future, there are certainly a lot of corners of the German energy establishment, the German business elite, and the German policy circles that would welcome a return to business as usual with the Kremlin. I can guarantee you that those calls would come almost immediately. And so that's an incredibly concerning situation, because certainly we've seen that the Putin regime specifically, not the concept of Russia as a country in general, but the Putin regime specifically cannot be returned to as a partner in any sense of the word. It is a national security threat, pure and simple, to Western democracies, in particular Europe. And so there's this lamentation in Berlin that maybe the foreign policy and national security center of gravity in Europe is shifting east to places like Warsaw and Vilnius and Tallinn. It is. Let's face it, it is.
There is a perception, too, that the U.S. president in this, by changing his mind, he did it because he wanted to present to Russia, this picture of unity among the West. Is that at such a great risk right now that the U.S. president had to do what he had to do today? I mean, is that what we're seeing happening?
Well, look, I think it's great that we're sending the Abrams tanks. I think it's going to take a while, as your previous guest pointed out, for them to have specifically those systems to be trained up and have impact on the battlefield. I think we also should be going right ahead with sending ATACMS and sending and working with NATO's eastern flank partners on transferring NATO MiGs that are in those countries to help fighter jet capacity in Ukraine. But what we're really seeing is, the unity, the discussion of unity here. Again, that's a Washington-Berlin unity that's being cordoned off, right? We had unity from a lot of other countries on NATO's eastern flank, the United Kingdom, you had Poland and the Baltic states, et cetera, all saying that they would transfer these Leopard 2 tanks if only Berlin would give the okay. And again, this wasn't even a question of whether Berlin itself would bring these tanks over there and allow their own tanks to go to Ukraine, but to even allow the re-export control of those tanks from these other countries that are willing.
Benjamin, I've got about 30 seconds. Let me ask you, after what has happened in the last couple of days, behind closed doors, what do you think is the condition of U.S.-German relations tonight?
I think it's great. Frankly, I think that the condition of U.S.-German relations is prioritized by this administration, possibly, above any other relationship in Europe. I think that time and time again, whether it's in the energy security space, whether it's in the national security space, et cetera, this has been almost a policy mantra of this unity. Washington, Berlin, of course, had to be a significant change after the Trump administration. But I think, again, there are a lot of other areas of Europe, most of Europe, that are trying to help Ukraine more vociferously, and that needs to be considered as well.
Benjamin Schmitt, as always, good talking with you. Wish we had more time. Appreciate your time tonight. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Brent.